Hello, Facebook. We will be live streaming here on YouTube as well. Hello, YouTube. We are live streaming. This is the VBC Vet-A-Thon. We'll be starting the program here in just about a minute. Excited to kick things off this year. Happy Veterans Day to those of you joining us on the social media platforms. Excited to get things going here. We're going to share our audio. We'll start letting everybody in once we play the music. And we got 12 hours of programming and veteran stories for everybody. Thank you for joining us. Here we go.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you
Good
see
morning.
me clear? Hi
We can
there.
see you.
Is the lighting okay?
I believe so. You, Stu?
Yeah.
Hi, Stu. Welcome. Brad, Sandy,
Hi.
Carol, hello. Good morning. Happy Veterans Day, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We got any Marines out there?
It is. Happy belated birthday.
One day, 248 years.
That's
do I
right.
look? Not too bad for 248.
That's true. Not too bad at all. We have a nice small crowd to start us off here with the Vet-A-Thon. Though, as you know, Brad is a marathon runner.
Yes.
The Vet-A-Thon is not a race. It is
a
It is a light jaunt through veteran stories for the day. We are live streaming now on Facebook and YouTube. I want to welcome you guys to this is the third annual VBC Vet-A-Thon. My name is Sean Hall. I'm Director of Programming with the VBC. Our mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. We have 12 hours of veteran stories to go through starting now. We do 11 to 11 on the 11th day of the 11th month. Easy for me to see, 11th day of the 11th month. And today's Veterans Day. Yesterday was the birthday of the Marine Corps. Brad, you're our Marine Corps veteran here. How did you celebrate?
Well, I was invited back to my place of work 2 years ago. I retired from RTI International, and they had a wonderful celebration. And our guest was retired Sergeant Major Richel Painter, who was part of the female engagement team in Afghanistan and Native American. Boy, she told such a compelling story. We have to have her on the show to learn more about her service and her impressions of, being in the military, really being a pioneer as one of only 23 female sergeant majors to date to reach that rank. So I look forward to having her on the show. But, we put out the flag, the Marine Corps flag, and you text and call your Marine buddies, and it's just a great way to connect. And during the ceremony, they had a different veterans stand up and sing their service songs. All I can say is the rest of the services were weak, very weak. And but the Marines, as you know, bonded together, and we gave a resounding rendition of the Marine Corps hymn.
Excellent. It's nice to hear. Well, it's a beautiful day here in Pittsburgh, sunny and beautiful. So I'm sure the parade went very well, though it was a chilly morning, 35 degrees here. So when they were lining up for the parade, I'm sure it was quite frigid. But Todd will be joining us in a couple hours. Him and I worked through the schedule. I'll be doing the first two here. And we'll show a share screen to start, just so we can thank a sponsor and get things going. Before we get to our first guest of the first hour of Vet-A-Thon, Stu Richel. Stu, I'm excited to have you a part of this program. And you have some pieces from a play you wrote, Vietnam Through My Lens, that we're going to hear on this hour, which we're very excited to get to. First up, yes, VBC Vet-A-Thon today, November 11th. Excited to have you all here and throughout the day. We want to thank FedEx for sponsoring the VBC Vet-A-Thon. They've sponsored us for a couple of years now. They have a couple hours scheduled throughout the day, as they have many veterans within their organization that they bring on to Vet-A-Thon and to share stories. So they'll be coming up at the 12 o'clock hour, and later on in the day, I'll share the schedule here shortly. This is our current VBC magazine. As you can see, Elvis is our cover boy. We had a wonderful veteran on who served with Elvis share his stories earlier on this year, and he and Todd collaborated on a wonderful article for the VBC magazine. If you don't have this, it should arrive soon. And if you don't get it, it's free quarterly. All we need is your address. All you have to do is send it to us at either Sean, S-H-A-U-N, or Todd, T-O-D-D, at veteransbreakfastclub.org, and we're happy to put a VBC magazine in the mail for you. A couple of announcements. Our Lioness podcast continues to go strong. We have 2 more episodes planned for the Lioness podcast. We have an hour of Vet-A-Thon. We're going to bring on Daria, and her and I are going to share bits of our knowledge about what's been going on with the Lioness podcast and this incredible story. She'll fill in later. To my understanding, as we talked about on the podcast, a lot of these women served in combat prior to the combat exclusion policy. They want recognition. And that's starting to gain traction in DC. And guess what? Not only are they trying to do that for the CSTs, the FETs, but the Lionesses as well. And they're using our podcast because that is the most up-to-date information that is happening right now. It's very exciting stuff. Daria is going to fill us in with more information later on today. But we're happy as VBC to be able to provide this platform for these stories that is happening. It's causing change, that these women will get recognition for the service that they had. Scuttlebutt's going to be coming up on Monday. This is the other podcast that I host. What the Taliban Told Me, Ian Fritz. He's going to be a main guest on our happy hour coming up in a couple months. But he joined me because What the Taliban Told Me comes out this week. And it's an incredible book about, he's a cryptologist, linguist. He knows Dari and Pashto, was served in the Air Force, flew in CM-130s up above Afghanistan, listening in on the Taliban, had a lot of very interesting stories to share. Really interesting dude as well. So please give the Scuttlebutt a listen and join us again in a couple of months. I think in February, he's going to rejoin us on a happy hour to dive in a little deeper with our live program. And on Monday night, we will have Glenn host this program. We will have James Conroy on to talk about his book, The Devils Will Get No Rest. Glenn mentioned, and he's going to be hosting 2 hours within the Vet-A-Thon. He mentioned that he thought he had read everything there is to know about FDR and Churchill, but as soon as he started turning the pages of this book, he couldn't stop, and was really excited to bring on James to talk about his book. So just those announcements to start us off. We'll be chiming in throughout the day. I'm going to do a little mute all here, and I will ask Stu to be able to unmute himself. And what we'll do here.
Is that right?
There we go. You're good, Stu. Excellent. And I will do one more screen share before we get to you, Stu. I just want to go over our schedule for the day. As you can see, the 11 to 12 hour, we have 1st Infantry Division combat photography and journalist Stu Richel. We will be getting to you in just a sec, Stu. 12 to 1, we will have FedEx Ground share stories from their workers, veterans. We have 1 to 2, a Holocaust survivor and French resistance fighter. 2 to 3, the World War II Logbook Project with Lars McKee and Nick DeVoe. They're going to be joining us from Sweden and St. Lucia. So VBC and Vet-A-Thon have gone global. Atlanta will be joining us again. They joined us last year from 3 to 4. They are an incredible veteran organization, veteran service organization in, you guessed it, Atlanta. That's Lloyd Knight, Scott Luton, and Kevin Horgan. They had a great comedy hour last year, just coming on, talking to us about what they've been doing down in Atlanta. Great veterans. Again, FedEx will take over from 4 to 5. We will be talking with World War II submarine veteran Julian Moses. Glenn will be hosting that hour from 5 to 6. We have 100-year-old Canadian World War II veteran Nick Janicki joining us with Scott Masters. Scott Masters will host the 6 to 7 hour. As I mentioned before, Daria Summers, she will be joining me from 7 to 8 on the Lioness Hour. And then 8 to 9, Glenn will be back with David Krissinger. And he has Ernie Pyle and the story of World War II. Guadalcanal, David Holland is going to be hosting from 9 to 10. I believe he's joining us from Australia to host that hour. 10 to 11, we have the National Veterans Art Museum to close out the day. And again, we'll be simulcasting this throughout the day. If you don't have time to join us for the full 12 hours, that's fine. I won't even be on for the full 12 hours. That's a long time. But please join us periodically throughout the 12 hours. You can just jump in and out of the Zoom room, pop on Facebook, listen in for a bit, pop back out, eat a snack, come back on, continue on with your Veterans Day activities and enjoy yourself. But as promised, Stu, thank you so much for joining us for the first hour. Really excited to get to your play and to hear a bit more of your story.
Happy to be here. The pieces you'll get today, the scenes are from a show that I wrote in 2014 called Vietnam Through My Lens. Stories prompted by people I've met along the way through Vietnam and beyond. So I wanted to give you just a sample today of what it was like, what the show is like, 4 or 5 scenes, if we get there.
Absolutely.
And I'll start right off if you'd like.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I have you set on just you are spotlighted. So as an actor, and I know that world deeply and personally, you are the camera. You're good. Your framing is good. You're good to go.
Okay. All right. Well, soon after my return from R&R, I found myself sitting on top of a tank in the jungle with Captain Zoltan Szabo, commander of a bunch of tanks and armored personnel carriers. Szabo's men had set up camp for him, vehicles in a circle pointed outward like the spokes of a wheel, a good defensive position, I was told. Szabo had kind of an Eastern European accent. Captain, mind if I ask where you're from? Hungary. When did you get to the States? 1959. Escaped during Hungarian Revolution. Family in New Jersey sponsored me. What are you doing here? I owe it to my country. Wow. Crawls under the barbed wire, barely escapes with his life, manages to get to the States, and then says thanks by putting his life on the line. Captain, how do you see your career evolving in the military? My branch is armor. I hope to get back to Europe. If there is World War III, it will be for there with armor. Properly humbled, I wrote a story about Szabo. Okay, fast forward. 1988, I'm sitting on a couch in my house in San Jose, California, watching the nightly news on the tube. A guy was arrested as he got off a plane in Miami while traveling from South America to Europe. Case of espionage. Biggest at that point since World War II. An organization chart went up on the screen. At the top of the chart, Zoltan Szabo. When I picked my jaw up off the ground, I called the FBI, told them of my brief association with Szabo, sent them a copy of my article. Szabo was not the guy arrested in Miami that day, but he had indeed gotten back to Europe and recruited over a dozen people to copy and carry documents that eventually made their way into the hands of the Hungarian intelligence service and presumably their equivalents in Moscow. Thousands and thousands of pages detailing NATO's plans in the event of a war in Europe. Szabo's top recruit was Clyde Lee Conrad, bright American soldier with a top secret clearance. Conrad was arrested by the Germans and in 1988 convicted of espionage and high treason. He died in a German prison at age 50. Another member of Szabo's happy little crew was recruited by Szabo in Vienna in 1967. 67. So when I met Szabo in 69 in Vietnam, he was already a spy. I suppose he had been dropped off on shore. Not too hard to have gotten under the barbed wire under those circumstances. And when he said, I owe it to my country, he was telling the truth. But the bastard was talking about the wrong country. Szabo was eventually arrested and in 1989 convicted of espionage by the Austrians. Never served a day in prison, though, because of his help in exposing Clyde Lee Conrad. Savvy devil, that Szabo. That's story one.
Story one, scene. So this is true. These are true. These are true stories that happened to you that you
Oh
decided
yeah.
to dramatize.
Oh yeah. That's true of all the ones there in the show. There are 26 scenes, some shorter than this, one or two longer, but they're all true. They're, moments where I emphasize something or another or filled in something, but oh, that's absolutely true. I don't know that you can find Szabo's picture on the internet, and I never took a shot of him. But there was information I gathered online from one of the defense agencies about Szabo, and um, so it's true. I
What
don't
made
think you
you?
can find him sipping on a cocktail in Palm Beach or something like that.
Was it Szabo?
Szabo. First name Zoltan, Zoltan. See what you can get.
For as odd as a name as that is, if you Google Zoltan Szabo, there
Yeah.
are actually there are actually quite a few Zoltan
Well,
Szabos out there.
I remember someone telling me that a Hungarian who works in my apartment building was telling me that either Zoltan or Szabo means shoemaker or something like that. So,
It's just
so
like a
you can,
lineup. This is our
so
lineup.
you know, oh my, look at that.
I don't know
I
if any of
don't, uh, I don't think he's going to be looking for more publicity, and I doubt you're going to find him
probably not.
online. But anyway, that
What
is
a
funny.
what a strange happenstance. And obviously whenever you saw his name there again, it rang the bell and
Extraordinary,
yeah.
extraordinary. I mean, it wasn't surprising that I recognized the name. I didn't know anyone else like that, but the whole idea, and I wondered what he was thinking when I
Mhm.
showed up out of nowhere. You get dropped off in a chopper. You're out there with a bunch of tanks and armored personnel carriers. You introduce yourself to the commanding officer. There was no ritual, no procedure for what I was doing. You just show up. And I wondered what he was thinking, how odd it would be that someone came to interview him. I wonder whether he had a touch of nervousness, but nothing that showed up as far as I was concerned. And certainly I wasn't considering that alternative.
Does I don't want to ruin a future scene, but is there a part in a future scene that tells us how you got to Vietnam?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't going to be on, but I'm gonna give it to you right now. It tells the
Okay,
story.
sure.
Um, I had been after Fort Jackson at a basic at Fort Jackson. Then I was sent to Fort Gordon, Georgia, to be a clerk. And after 4 or 5 months at Fort Gordon, I decided I wanted to go to Vietnam. Not trying to be a patriot, wasn't trying to be a hero, wasn't even sure we should have been over there. But I had this odd feeling that I would regret having spent 2 years of my life in the military if I wasn't where history was being made. Now, ordinarily, the Army would be happy to oblige. Step right up, soldier. Good moan in Vietnam. But I had these two buddies in Vietnam, Dave Myers, Kenny Gasparez. Dave was from Norman, Oklahoma. Kenny was a Cajun boy. Both these fellas were low-level enlisted people, just like me, but they worked in personnel. Those were the folks who made up the list called levies by which soldiers got to one place or another around the world. Guys, put me on a levy for now. No, 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 no. Yes, now, but I want to go. You get your kill desk, Chewie. I ain't going to do that to you. Come with us, Taiwan. And isn't that ironic? Had I wanted not to go to Vietnam, do you think I would have known these guys? I submitted a form to volunteer. The next levy came out. My name wasn't on it. Dave and Kenny had kicked it off. Guys, I want to go. Oh, so in early December 1968, my name was on orders to report to the Oakland Army Air Terminal. Next stop, Republic of Vietnam. That's the way it began.
Were you frightened?
Oh, once it starts getting real, you get a little more nervous. I did have this hope, feeling, prayer, I suppose, that everything would turn out okay, that I'd get back alive in one piece. But certainly there were moments where you wondered about that. Um, yeah. And then most of my time was not in the same degree of risk, I would say, as so many other guys. Um, medevac chopper pilots, by definition, flying into hot, dangerous landing zones, 24/7, risk it all, dog handlers who were, along with the German shepherds, were leading patrols in the jungle, trying to find tripwires, buried munitions, the enemy itself. And these guys were often the first to be seen by the enemy. Tunnel rats, crazy little guys who go into these holes and tunnels dug by the VC to hide munitions, underground living quarters, even an underground hospital complex we came across. Crazy guys who'd go into these things, and they'd sometimes go into tunnels, no room to turn around, and they had to crawl forward slowly in the darkness with only a pistol and a flashlight. Try that out. What's up ahead? I mean, there's courage. And then I get goosebumps just talking about it. So my time over there had moments, short periods of what I thought was real risk, but there were these guys that were 24/7, and I ended up writing an essay because I had a special affection, affection's the right word, and respect and admiration for the infantryman, and that was the poor guy who was slogging around through the mud, the jungle, the rice paddies, always with the risk of ambush just around the corner. As I like to put it, the fellow who didn't have the connections to get into a reserve unit back home, the fellow whose family had a long history of military service, the fellow who wasn't the sort to while away the hours in a coffee house praising Jane Fonda's visit to North Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And when I was over there in Nam, I wrote an essay in praise of the infantrymen. It got picked up by a rag called the Overseas Weekly. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with it or may remember it. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you now, Sean, is read that essay. I think it's very moving to me. And when I do it on stage, I can't help but get moved at certain points. And that it's the reality of that I think helps make the show, the live performance on stage or even here, something that's that beats film. Sure. Here it is. His body is covered not with modern fashion, but with the rags and grime of war. To remove the stain, he looks to his sleeve or a towel around his neck, not fortunate enough to have greater convenience at hand. The clouds around him are hardly silver-lined. They're laden with rain, makers of mud. Their only redeeming value is as a buffer, stopping the sun from mercilessly bearing down. When rain appears, he retreats to the sanctity of a disciplined mind and listens to the patter of the drops on his head, not a roof. And while others bathe, he scrounges to drink. Water is sometimes too precious to waste on keeping the body clean. As if to tease, the sun will replace the unbearable rain and dry the feet, sore and rotted. The grunt takes it, doing what he must, doing whatever he can against the elements. He warms his food, if at all, with the heat from stick-like explosives. Fruit cocktail and pound cake are delicacies, much the same as snails or caviar to the beautiful people. His food is tolerable, but becomes tiresome after 9 or 10 months of similarity. Don't speak of loneliness to him. He knows it too well. Don't preach about losses and the meaning of death. He can count higher than you. And no one has undergone more of the experiences which make a guy cherish life and what it has to offer. He has lived and fought with great friends, some of whom will return home. But he notes the irony that those who live live only to return to riots, bloodshed, despair, or perhaps hope. Don't speak to him of race. The blood his brother shed was real and not strangely was red as his. When life was on the line, colors blended. After all, color won't stop a well-aimed round. Speak to him of nice things. Scream about living and life itself. Whisper about people, love, softness. He's a human being who wants to leave the names Grunt and Leg behind him in the dim past, where such history belongs. His personal victory is simply in terms of leaving Vietnam. He's finished his tour, no more chalking off days on a calendar. Now his future lies with his folks, his job, his girl, his world. The world should thank him and let him go on his way. Give him the respect he merits. Let him pick up the pieces and move on to a new and fruitful life. As an infantryman, he has earned his place out of the sun. He deserves no less. That's it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, my silence is to let that sit for a minute, because I have several questions, but something written that beautifully, I always like to give it breath. You wrote that? How old?
Oh, yeah.
How old were you
How old was I?
when you wrote that?
Um, let's see, 20, 24, 18, 22, 20, somewhere around 24, something like that. I was older than most guys, I suppose, who were drafted.
You mentioned that was an essay. I felt it was more poetry.
Oh, thank you.
And
I
to have which leads
Bill
me
Geist, if you
please.
have heard of him. Bill was on CBS 60 Minutes for a long time. He worked for the New York Times. His son is Willie Geist, who's on CNBC or one of those NBC things. And Bill came to the show when it premiered in New York in 2014. And Bill worked in the public information office, as I did. He was an officer, but it was very unmilitary in the office. We all did the same things, went out, took pictures, wrote stories. And but Bill made a comment that he thought it was the best piece he'd seen written over there. I appreciated that.
That is high praise, and certainly.
Oh, he's a wonderful author and commentator, and now he's I don't know if he's listening today, but you know he's got medical issues to deal with, and so you know, good wishes to Bill Geist.
Do you feel that several questions about your essay? How much maturity did you gain? Because to write something like that, you can't be. I feel like you can't really just be 18 coming out of high school. You have to gain life experience, and the life experience you gained being in Vietnam, I'm sure it was, you know, extreme in a lot of ways, very quick. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Look, someone asked me, a good buddy of mine asked me a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, how did Vietnam change you? I remember looking him in the eye, but I didn't have a good answer. And I don't think I probably hadn't thought about it hard enough. But the thought stuck with me. How did it affect me? And it became a part of the show. At the outset, in one of the first scenes, I talk about this moment where a guy asked me that question. And then toward the end of the show, I come back to it, and I think it'll show you some of what I think I've learned over time because of that experience. But it's interesting you come at it that way about maturity. So earlier in the show, I told you how a friend asked how Vietnam had changed me, and I suppose, and I looked him in the eye, but I didn't have a good answer, and I suppose I hadn't thought about it very deeply. But If asked today, I'd tell my friend that my experience over in Vietnam has simply colored my whole life, made me more appreciative of everything we have here, the freedom, the opportunities, the very reason so many people from other countries still risk their lives to get in here. I tell my friend that my admiration has grown enormously for those who place themselves in harm's way every day so the rest of us can flourish. Cops, firemen, soldiers. 343 firemen left behind at the World Trade Center. And sometimes I still see those guys going up the stairs when everyone else was going down. And it breaks your heart. And I have a few questions. Would some form of national service after high school help the young folks of our country grow up? A choice, perhaps, of environmental protection projects, disaster relief assistance, construction of low-income housing, or the military. And with that common background, unite the country in shared sacrifice and encourage all of us to think a little bit harder about the welfare of all as opposed to the welfare of one. That's that scene. But it speaks to what you've said, because I don't want to say grew old, but I grew older in Vietnam. And I think while that may not be the perfect setting for everybody to grow older, I think it does a lot. And unfortunately, there are bad consequences for many. But when you come back, you got to look at things with a different eye. You're not forced to, but you do. And then you, in days like this and in times like this, with the country being torn apart by rivalries and extreme positions, you just kind of say that, you got to look for the kernel of goodness and come together somehow. And I do think required national service, don't have to call it a draft, but that's what it would essentially amount to, but with more choice. But required national service would make better citizens out of young folks, and they wouldn't be exposing themselves to some of what they do afterward, and they wouldn't have it, I don't want to say so easy, but things wouldn't be handed to them. Everything they have thereafter would be earned and feel earned. And they would have a piece of the action, a slice of the pie, and they would know what it is to be a citizen, whether it was military or other things. So I guess that's an answer to some of what you're asking about with maturity.
I find it interesting. I mentioned I have a background in acting, so I remember pieces that I had to memorize for different shows, things like that. And you had mentioned before reading your essay that there were always pieces to that kind of make you a little more emotional.
Yeah.
And it's especially interesting 50 years, 60 years on from writing it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna age you, but I'm gonna,
No, I mean, the writing of, oh yeah, that's right. I mean, that was 1969. I'm 79.
Yeah.
That was in 69.
So quite a bit of time ago.
Over 50.
Right. So there are still pieces of that still strike at the core of you.
And it's funny you say that. I never would have thought of that. Hmm. But it does. And there are a couple of other scenes where certain things tend to happen to me. And I have to halt for a moment, and nothing's contrived. There's no acting going on. Mm-hmm. And then an extra thing about it, when I noticed it, and I have a copy of it in front of me as people could see. I said to my director, I think we had already premiered the show, but I said, I want a special piece of copy paper, not just standard white. I want something that's a little more solemn or a little more sophisticated or something more substantial. And even that, when I read it, I touch the paper, and even that starts to move me. But yeah, there are certain points in there which almost inevitably, when I start talking about loneliness and preaching about the losses of meaning and death, and then when I talk about race and the blood his brother shed, and other softer stuff toward the end, I do get moved. And I hadn't thought about it in those terms, the ones you just said, all these years later. But it's true.
Would you like to read your next piece?
I won't read anymore. That's the only one you get read. I do the others.
There you go.
All the rest is done. I'll, yeah, this one is an indicator of how the show, the entirety of the show, is about the odd path by which I got to Vietnam, what I did there, and then how things have come about since then. And this one's about that. Sometimes you go looking for a kindred spirit. Sometimes the spirit just finds you. Warm summer night, New York City, 2008 or so, Little Italy. I pushed my nose up against the window of Florio's, an old Italian restaurant on Grand Street. Rumor had it you could smoke cigars in there, and that would have been quite a good discovery given Mayor Bloomberg's anti-smoking campaign. I opened the door just a touch. The smoke was dense. You could just about squeeze it. And then out of that smoke came Anthony, huge guy, the maitre d'. What can I do for you guys? Master of the obvious. Can you smoke cigars in here? What do you think? Come on in. In we went, my buddy Howard Reed and I, into this oasis. So began my love affair with Florio's. Lawrence Amoroso, the owner, wonderful, staunch supporter of our troops. Military photos and memorabilia adorned the walls. If a soldier walked in there in uniform during Fleet Week, no charge. Drinks, meals, no charge. Larry even sent over special boots to Afghanistan. He felt that his boots provided better protection against IEDs than those then being issued by the military. And he had an apartment upstairs converted into a clubhouse for cigar smokers. Now, this was nirvana. I introduced some vets to the place. We'd go in there for lunch and then adjourn upstairs as gentlemen for cocktails and a post-lunch cigar. Well, one Wednesday, I walked into Florio's, wanted to say hi to Anthony and then tell him how many guys we were going to have for lunch the following Monday. Where's Larry? He won't be coming back. What do you mean? He's at home. Home? He's got cancer. I looked online for a place that made athletic plaques. Hustled up to one of them in Midtown, told the proprietor my situation. Here's the text and layout for a small plaque. The guy's dying. I need the plaque in 2 days. He supports our troops. I had that beautiful little plaque in 2 days. And the following Monday, walked into Florio's and passed the plaque around the table so the guys could take a look. Al Smith, Lieutenant, Infantry Platoon Leader, Army. Chet Brooks, Captain, Air Force Intelligence. Dick Holt, retired 2-star Army General. John, a B-52 pilot, and a handful of others. The text was simple. Larry, you have cared for those who serve. God bless you. The Lunchtime Soldiers of Florio's, 17 January, 2011. I handed the plaque to Larry's dad. He clutched it to his chest. Didn't say a word. Turns out Larry had just died. That's that scene.
Wow. I'm going back again to my acting career, and there was a play that I did, and I'm sure everybody knows it, All My Sons.
Yeah.
I played the son. Very
Yeah.
difficult role. Very
Sure.
difficult to do it every night. I mean,
Of course.
six times, 7 times a week,
Yes.
and it devastates you every time. I remember at the end of the show, I had to step out into the sun and just let the play kind of fall off of me,
Huh.
because it would affect me so greatly by the end. I feel like this is such a storytelling. This is you're bearing your soul every time you put this show on. It's got to be exhausting in a way.
It is, but it's fulfilling.
Mhm.
When I do it on stage, there are some features that we can't have here. There'll be some of my photos projected to punctuate certain scenes in the show. And so they can see something, an additional feature. And I see the eyes. I see the eyes close up, and they're looking at me, my eyes. They can see that it's real. And I feel real good, but and drained. But I have to tell you what maybe the most fulfilling part is, after a performance, every time there will be some, if I'm allowed, because they don't want to rush you out, union problems or the state, more wages or something. If I'm allowed to stick around right there, there'll be people who'll come up to me, and they all have a little thing they'd like to see or share, and those are very telling. One woman came up to me in New Jersey, was at a college, and she said to me, and it's very halting as they come up to me, because it's almost like a confessional. She comes up and she's almost tearful, and she says, my brother served in Vietnam. And she said nothing else. And she turned away. She couldn't say any more. And you know that she was talking about the past tense and nothing going on after that. Mm-hmm. A guy came up to me. There's another scene which I didn't do yet, and won't be able to do after I just mentioned this bit, really. But on this plane that took me from Long Binh to Lai Khe, headquarters of the 1st Infantry Division, it was probably a C-130, or had that little platform that came back and took me and a bunch of other guys to Lai Khe. And as maybe 10, 15 minutes into the short flight, I noticed outside that an engine was on fire. So, this is not what you call comforting. I don't, and I joke about it in the piece I do. I said, I asked for a stewardess, and certainly no stewardess, but I don't remember what I was thinking, but I assure you, I was not smiling. And I mentioned that scene. And then one of the guys who came up afterward said, wait a minute, I was in a plane that had the same thing happen, and it was that same goddamn type of plane. He said, something, the thing that came down back and the platform came down. And I thought that was really ironic. I guess that's a hint of a design deficiency or something. I don't know. But the people come up, and here's one. This was during the premiere in New York in 2014. A guy comes up to me and he says, and this doesn't happen often, but it happened a few times in New York City. He said, I was an anti-war protester, and I was myself, Stu, was over in Vietnam during that heavy period of protest, 68, 69, 70, especially 69. And he comes up to me, he said, I was an anti-war protester. He said, I don't have any regrets about doing what I did, protesting against it. And I said, if that's the way you felt, I don't have any intellectual objection to your having that position. Of course, if guys went to Canada just out of convenience, not conviction, I have a different perspective on that. Of course, you never know which, but if someone had a strong position intellectually and emotionally and religiously, perhaps, then I have a respect for that. So he said, I have no problem with what I did back then. And I said, nor I with what you did. But he said, I do have a problem with how vets were treated when they got home. Mm-hmm. And that is it draws a distinction, which I've always felt. And they should feel ashamed. Anyone who did something to a veteran, whether they spit on him, whether they yelled at him, whether they called him a baby killer, whether all this stuff. And that includes members of some veterans organizations who didn't welcome home, I learned, as warmly the Vietnam vet as others. That may be, though I'm not sure of this, it's still speculation, that may be one of the reasons the Vietnam Veterans of America came into existence as another veterans organization. I'm not sure. I can't get that down pat, but it wouldn't surprise me. I never had any of that stuff done to me, but I've had a good buddy, Al Smith, whom I mentioned as being an infantry officer over there, platoon leader in the 1st Infantry Division, as it turns out. He got the spit on trick, and everybody got, and they didn't want to wear their uniforms. What is that? I mean, the distinction I would draw is between those who make policy and those who honor what they believe is their moral or legal obligation to serve the country. I mean, if you have a problem, speak with your legislators, speak with the president, speak with whomever you want to speak with. But boy, I don't think it makes intellectual or moral sense to abuse the returning soldier.
Right. And I want to make just a quick comment based on what you said. Like I said, it would be exhausting to kind of bare your soul and do that. But you said it is also fulfilling. And I agree with you that the flip side of that coin, there was a fulfillment of artistic or just being able to express yourself that way. It was I don't know, maybe it's kind of like being drunk. you feel embarrassed and exhilarated all in the same sort of moment. It's very interesting.
I hear you, and look, I understand your feeling in a passionate, important, well-written piece like that. You don't often, I mean, my experience is you're not going to get that emotional in pieces that don't have substance, pieces that are written well and have a core of important story to tell. Right. I mean, it's got to be a story, an important story, well told, not drivel. And that, of course, all my sons is right up there. I did have a funny thing happen, slightly related. 20 years ago or so, I was going to do a short off-Broadway series of scenes. I was in 1 or 2 of them, and there were going to be 3 or 4. There were a bunch of actors. And the scene I was given was actually, it was based on something that Arthur Miller had written. And I still have that piece of paper that came to me, giving me, when I realized it was coming from his fax machine in Connecticut somewhere. But he's, one of our great playwrights. So I appreciate that opportunity. And whenever I said some of his words, you can't help but feel something more than when it's drivel.
Absolutely. Reside, how long is your play?
About an hour and 15 minutes or so overall, when it's done pretty quickly.
Well, certainly being able to memorize that amount of text is you have to be pretty masterful to do that.
Well,
I know that's a difficult.
Giving me too much credit there, but I, as I was writing it, over time, you start to absorb stuff. The words change over time, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. The words change, and so it's remarkable how much some things, not the core, but some things, the emphasis, even how I feel about the words. Yeah. I started asking myself, is this true? Is what I just said true? Did I really see that? You start questioning yourself, and I react to it. And even, I got to tell you this. There's a scene. How much time we got? We have
about 13 minutes.
Okay,
give or take about a minute. So I
won't be doing this scene, but I'll tell you what it's about. And it was about, we have quarterly luncheons of combat vets in the city in Manhattan, and many are Vietnam. All branches, not all branches are represented. And it was during the course of one of these luncheons 5 years ago or so, I learned that one of the guys across the table from me, we'll call him John, as I did in the scene with Florio's, the B-52 pilot. And I knew that and that's all, his name's fictional and everything else in the scene is fictional. And it was clear he needed some financial assistance. And so I didn't know him well. I barely knew him at all, but I offered him help. Later on, when I was writing the show, the last scene I ended up writing was about this loan, non-interest loan that was essentially a gift. It was I said to myself, and this is being stupid, I said, wait a minute, they're going to see this play, the world is going to see this play, and some vets who know John well will see it. And that's kind of revealing something very personal. Do I have the right, legal, or moral to do this without his permission? This came up as I was about to go into rehearsal. It was the last scene I wrote, and I liked it a lot. I actually use it as the opening scene. And I said, I struggled with this for a couple of nights, saying, am I going to get back to him via email and say, do I have your permission? I didn't see a legal obligation, but I ultimately felt a moral obligation to get back to him. And I sent him a brief email saying, John, this is what I'd like to do. And all facts are changed, but there will be some people, obviously, in New York and elsewhere who might recognize it. I said, I can't proceed without getting your permission, and I won't do it unless you say okay. And then I had trouble pushing the button to send that email, and I pushed it. And it wasn't more than an hour later or so that I got back a brief email saying, I owe you. Good luck with your project. I think that's just the whole the scene and the response talk to, in my view, camaraderie.
Totally. I want to mention, as a side note to everybody joining us, this is the Veterans Breakfast Club. We are beginning in the first hour of our 12-hour Vet-A-Thon. We're talking with Stu Richel, veteran and author, playwright of Vietnam Through My Lens, which we've been hearing pieces of throughout the first hour here. If you have a question during this hour, or if in the future throughout the Vet-A-Thon, if you're joining us, feel free to do the reaction, raise your hand, or you can just wave your hand here. We will try to, I'll try to see you with your hand raised if you have a question for Stu. Stu, how were you able to pick those scenes? You just say you wrote that last one as you were in rehearsals, thinking back through your life, and you have an hour and 15 show to fill, give or take, probably like 10 minutes. How are you able to really focus in on these are the scenes I want to put down on paper and get out there?
Well, for
and
starters,
I'm sure it was difficult to sort of cut some things as well as you sort of were,
look, I wasn't sure. I was getting put. This isn't a scene in the show, but it's the way the show came about. Every Christmas, tell me if I'm running short. Every Christmas, there was a party at an artistic director's apartment in Manhattan, and I'd be outside. He and his wife had the ground floor apartment. It's late December. It's Christmas time. I'm outside smoking a cigar and having a beer with one other guy. And after I told him a story or so, he said, you got to put this down. Next year, I said, no, I don't want a vanity piece. And I don't know that I have enough to say. Next year, same party, different cigar, different beers, same thing. I gave him another story and he said, this is valuable. Put it down. Third year, similar situation. Finally, I said, I'll do it. And so then the struggle began in early 2014. What do I remember? I don't have the great memory you think. I absorbed a lot over time, and that was useful for the creation of this piece. But right now, at my age, I really don't have the same ability to memorize much. I'm learning that in some auditions, and it's painful. But so I sat down and tried to remember what was meaningful to me or what happened. God, I came up with one or two scenes that came from a prior play I had written called Everyone's War, a prior solo show. A scene about basic training. It still resonates, and I have that early in this show. Very funny stuff. I remembered that during this story about going to New Orleans with Dave and Kenny, the two guys that said stay with us at Fort Gordon and then we'll go to Taiwan. I went down. Dave and I went down to visit Kenny in New Orleans, and we ended up at a parade. And the parade had a lot of parade of transvestites. There were all these parades. Parade of transvestites. I was absolutely shocked. Mm-hmm. And because it was 1971, I'd never seen such a thing before. And now I live in Greenwich Village in Manhattan. Well, so what's new? And you could just go out on the street in front of your apartment and you see strange things all the time. Mm-hmm. But during this parade, this transvestite parade, all of a sudden, one of the paraders, and there were thousands, one turns toward Dave and I, who were watching the parade, and he yells out, "Hey, Stu!" I said, Dave looks at me and he says, "Oh, "Oh, you have a friend in that parade?" I said, "Dave, I don't know who the hell this person is." And he says something like, "Look, I'm your friend. I can help you through this." And he's giving me this blank, this S about it. I said, "Dave, I don't know who the hell he is." Turns out, didn't learn it then. He's gone and by. Turns out he was the real estate guy that Kenny took us to get us an apartment in the French Quarter on the day we arrived. I didn't know. But that becomes a whole story. It's very funny. So you remember, I remembered things eventually. But it was a struggle. It took a period of weeks and months and then I had to write. And that takes lots of revisions still going on. And again, as you feel differently about words, you shift the focus, you shift emphasis, you might change words. I do. So yeah, it was a struggle to come up with enough to make me confident that I had enough. And I showed it to a producer lady friend of mine who has now become my partner, not in a social sense, but my partner in this artistic sense. She helps organize our tour when we go out to different places around the country. She's brilliant as a dramaturg to modify language, as a director, and she's no nonsense about that. She tells me what's up, and then as an administrator. So we have our own little team of a technical person who'll travel with us to help with projections at the right moment, and the director producer, because there are always issues that arise, always issues, and then myself. So it's a team of three when we go out. But I've forgotten where I started, but I hope I answered whatever question it was.
You did. And I'm reminded of a story about how here in the States, when we produce a show, you have 4 to 6 weeks maybe of rehearsal if you're lucky. And then you put the show up. So you don't get a whole lot of time to really sit with the words, really sit with the character. You have some time prior to that rehearsal, but that's on your own. It's not engaging. It's not, interacting with the director, things like that. But what I really love about how they do it in Europe is you sit with it a lot longer. There are playhouses where you're going to sit with the characters and the scenes for a year. And how much does that character change? How much does that emphasis change? How much does your understanding of the scene, of the subtext, of all these things that happen within the play? How much better do you understand all of that when you have that time? I bring this up because your understanding of your quote unquote character, no one else can do that. I think you could hand this play to anybody.
That's
They're
right.
not going to be able to perform it with the truth that you are.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Let me interrupt you for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at a name and a picture up at the top of the screen, and if I'm wrong, it's either a Thai or a Vietnamese name, and I can't pronounce it properly. But I remember reading about a fellow, and I might ask whether this gentleman is running for Congress or political office in Virginia, or whether I've got the wrong person. I believe. Oh, he's muted.
Sir, I unmuted you, but I don't want to. I probably won't. I'll mispronounce your name, so I would like you to introduce yourself. Welcome to the Vet-A-Thon.
Thank you very much, Sean and Mr. Richel. My name is Hai Cao. That's how I pronounce it. It's on the my business card behind. And I am running for office, but I'm not Hồng Cao in Virginia.
Okay.
I'm Hai Cao running in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh wow.
Well, you will have to join us for the Vetlanta hour. I'll mention here for our viewers, VBC, we are an apolitical organization, so we don't talk politics here in the room, though I do really appreciate you joining us and being a part of the day here. We have a very set schedule, so what I'd love to do is to invite you back, because as we mentioned here in the chat, that Mary mentioned, we'd love to hear your story, your life during the war, your escape, your life here. That would be something that I'm sure VBC would love to dive into. But as we go into about 2 more minutes, we're going to be jumping into the FedEx veterans. So we have a packed schedule now. Does that sound like something you'd be willing to come and join us with? Here, hi, let me ask you to mute. Go ahead.
Yes, I will be more than happy, and will be my honor to share my life and my journey from Vietnam to America with all of the veteran of the Vietnam War.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Please, if we don't have your contact information, if you could maybe put your email in the chat to me, we'll be happy to reach out to you. Maybe we can set something up and have you back on, because we'd love to hear that story. Stu, before we let you go, you're welcome to stay with us throughout if you'd like. But before we move on to the FedEx hour, Stu, I'd love to ask you one last question. Well, it's a two-part question, really. What is the one thing that you hope people would be able to take away from the play that you've written and you're performing? And where can people see it?
Look, I hope people enjoy it and are touched by it and are moved by it, so they think about things they haven't thought about before. But I want it to be a good piece of art. Yeah. And as well, in terms of where they can find it, right now, they can go to a website called vietnamthroughmylens.com, and it'll show you where we will be playing. We just had a couple of performances, one in Pennsylvania, one in upstate New York. But the upcoming, you can find on the website under the segment called Touring, vietnamthroughmylens.com.
Fantastic. I put that into the chat. Stu, I want to thank you for joining us for the first hour of Vet-A-Thon. You really kicked us off. I say you can't fumble the kickoff to the Super Bowl, and you certainly booted it through the upright. So
that's great. And thank you. You were marvelous as a partner in this.
Absolutely. I love acting. It's, one of my passions in life. So it's fun to talk to someone who has the same passion. You can speak the same language a bit, just like I always see the veterans do. You always get in the room and you guys always just know how to talk to each other. I love it. Stu, again, please join us throughout the day. If you have any time, you want to jump back in, you want to just say hi. We're happy. We're going to be here. A happy Veterans Day to you. Thank you again. And, best of luck. Break legs out there. Break legs out there.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Stu.